From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
He got into the race a little late, but in June, State Rep Frank Ferri became the third Democrat to announce a run for lieutenant governor, throwing his hat into the ring against Dan McKee and Ralph Mollis. Ferri has represented Warwick in the Rhode Island House since 2007, and he's making an energetic pitch to progressives with less than a month to go before the primary. This week on the first half of Newsmakers, Frank Ferri. Then, on paper, few U.S. House seats look safer than Democratic Congressman David Cicilline's. President Obama won the district by a 34-point margin in 2012. But despite the long odds, 3 opponents are challenging Cicilline this year, and one of them is a fellow Democrat. On the second half of Newsmakers, 1st Congressional District hopeful Matt Fecteau. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Ted Nisi, filling in once again this week for Tim White, who is off. Joining me on the panel is our old friend on Newsmakers, Ian Donis. He's political reporter at Rhode Island Public Radio. And Frank Ferri, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
So Frank, a lot of the other candidates got their first interview early, but you got into the race a little later, so we wanted to invite you in to get to know why you're running for this office. So I'll start with an easy question. Why are you running for lieutenant governor?
I believe we need someone in government who lives the challenge of this economy every day. People are tired of politics as usual.
Simple. Okay.
Simple.
That's all right. Well, that's you heard it here. You're here to hear first, folks. So you got into this race later than the candidates, as I said. What made you finally decide to pull the trigger? I'm sure it has to do with that. But what was the deciding factor when the others seemed like they were running for it for many, many months, and then you said, "No, I'm doing this too. I'm jumping into that race."
Well, you know, like I said, I am a small business person with 30 years experience. And I live every day. Others talk about business, the economy. I'm a small business person. I live it every day. I know what businesses need. I know what workers need. And I believe that I can speak the language of government, being as a representative for 7 years and being as a business person for 30 years. I believe I can speak that language, bring them together, and have them talk to each other.
You know the criticism of the Lieutenant Governor's office. It doesn't do anything. It's not worth $1 million a year. Bob Healy ran repeatedly on the platform of abolishing it and got a decent number of votes last time. So what's your case to people who aren't even sure why we have the Lieutenant Governor's office, why this is important, and therefore why you should be given it?
I believe the importance or the strength of the Lieutenant Governor's office is its independence. The Lieutenant Governor's office, when I'm there, will be a watchdog. We need to protect, we need to build jobs. We need to create jobs. We need to improve the economy. We need to protect the healthcare reforms that have allowed thousands of individuals and hundreds of small businesses access to high quality, affordable healthcare. I want to maintain the services to our most vulnerable of citizens, seniors and those who don't have a voice in government. And we have to restore trust in government. We are rated lowest on the totem pole as far as trust in government, and we need to restore that. I will call out politicians when it needs to be. I will be that watchdog.
Frank, you say you'll use the Lieutenant Governor's office as a watchdog to show that this isn't just campaign rhetoric for the voters. Can you point to examples in which you've been a watchdog in the General Assembly in your 7 years in the House of Representatives?
Well, you know, I've gone up against the leadership. As an example, my 4 years I've been pushing for payday loan reform. I've been pushing back against the leadership, having a majority of legislators sign on to this legislation, but still pushing back.
But many lawmakers have supported that. That hasn't gone anywhere.
I've just introduced a 5-point plan to restore trust in government because I believe people need to have faith in government again.
Let me ask you about that. Your plan includes prohibiting paid lobbyists and political action committees from contributing to lawmakers during the legislative session. Might sound like a good idea to a lot of people, but this would have to be approved by the General Assembly, whose members are the very ones who benefit from the status quo. So how would you actually convince lawmakers to support something contrary to their interest?
Well, by informing and educating. Look at it this way. I've had fundraisers. You know, family comes, friends come, lobbyists come. You raise money because you have to have a campaign. Imagine now, multiply that by all the legislators. There's 113 legislators in the General Assembly. Every one of them, during the session, is having a fundraiser. So lobbyists are going to all those and talking to leadership, talking to chair people, talking to legislators. They have an access that the regular citizens don't have.
I get it. I get why you're proposing this, but is it really realistic to think that the General Assembly would pass a move to cut off a funding stream for its members?
We have ratings, people rate us as the lowest in business friendliness. If we don't straighten this out, if we don't restore trust in government, if people can't believe in their government, businesses are not going to want to come here. This is an economic issue also.
And just to wrap that up, some people might think you're having an election day conversion on this. Why didn't you call for this kind of prohibition on fundraisers during the legislative session in your earlier days as a state rep?
Well, I'm running for lieutenant governor because I think this will give me the bully pulpit that is needed to bring this to light. As one of 75, it's a lot harder to do. But as the lieutenant governor, I will be able to advocate for this, and I will fight for this for the first 4 years I'm there anyway.
I want to stick with this question of the ethics plan you've put out because it's the meatiest thing I saw on your website. You mentioned, Ian mentioned this idea of ending the fundraisers during the legislative session. You said 5 points. What are the other 4 in brief?
Well, so we're going to reduce the influence of special interest money by not having fundraisers during this session. And then we're going to lengthen the period that former legislators have to wait before they can lobby. And that's 2 years for the rank and file, 4 years for chairperson and leadership, and actually 6 years for the Senate president and the Speaker of the House. We're also going to create new opportunities for transparency, and this is very simple. We're going to put online anybody who testifies in hearings, in committee hearings. Now we can do that right away because they sign in, they have sign-in sheets, and we know, the public knows who's doing what, who's representing who. We're going to give the Ethics Commission back their full authority. In 2009, they lost it with the Irons decision, and we have to restore it. And I also want to move the lobbying, compliance, and oversight to the Ethics Commission. That's where it should be. We need to take politics out of this system. We're also going to, well, this is just, shouldn't be, we didn't know it was, but there shouldn't be any loans being extended by lobbyists to legislators. And the fourth, if you excuse me a second, being on the TV, is, well, strengthen the Ethics Commission and, well, I think that's the 5.
I think I hit the 5. I think you hit them all. All right. So removing lobbying from the Secretary of State to the Ethics Commission, obviously it also sounds like a shot at your opponent, Ralph Mollis, who's the current Secretary of State and has been under fire since Tim White found that contract Mike Corso signed but never registered. Is that, do you really care to do that, or is that really this is an easy way to take a political shot at your opponent?
Michael Corso, you mentioned, 38 studios. Nobody is happy with what's happened with 38 studios, and we need transparency in this process. Obviously, Michael Corso should have been registered a lobbyist, should have been filling out his disclosure statements. We should have known this ahead of time. Yes, I guess we have to say that the Secretary of State didn't do his job. This isn't just a shot because I'm running against them. This is the fact. This is what the situation is. We need to remove that from politics. We have an elected official more or less investigating what elected officials did. I think we need to take that for transparency reasons, for trust in government.
You mentioned the 38 studios debacle. You were in the House in 2010 when you and other state reps voted for that. It was billed as a job creation measure, and we know it was the Economic Development Corporation that ultimately approved the $75 million loan for 38 studios. But particularly concerning how Republican Representative Robert Watson called this a disaster in the making, should you have been more skeptical about voting for the measure later used to fund 38 studios?
Well, let's go back to that time. Highest unemployment. We still have the highest unemployment. The economy, we get hit worse with this recession. We needed something to come out of it. The General Assembly got together and the Governor Kacheri at the time. This was a program that was going to guarantee loans to businesses. I'm a small business person. We need access to capital.
No doubt, but some people might say that rank and file lawmakers like yourself took at face value what they were told by leadership and perhaps should have been more skeptical. What do you say?
The EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, they're the ones that sat around a table with the governor Kacheri at the head of that table, they decided what companies were going to get the loan guarantees. There was no transparency. There should have been. 300 companies could have gotten that money. $75 million to one company, that was a poor decision by the EDC and by the governor.
One other element of your reform plan is restoring the authority of the Ethics Commission. The state Senate has been the main obstacle to doing that. How would you, as Lieutenant Governor, restore the authority of the Ethics Commission?
We will work to get it on the ballot. I think we have to educate and inform the public. They're the ones that need. There's going to be a groundswell, just like I did with marriage equality.
How are you going to convince Teresa Paiva-Weed that the speech and debate issue is not a significant one, and how will you get her to go along with your vision of what the Ethics Commission should be?
By using the Lieutenant Governor's office as a bully pulpit to get the message out. We know there's a need for it. We know there's a call for it by Rhode Islanders, and that will, when they go to their legislators and when they call them up and say, look, this is what we need, we have to have this on the ballot. We want to vote on it. That's how we're going to do it.
One of your signature issues in the House has been health care. And you're, as you said earlier, you're a big supporter of Health Source RI, the state's Affordable Care Act marketplace. One big outstanding question about that, as you know, is how to pay the cost of running Health Source RI going forward. There still isn't a funding source identified to pay for that. It's still running on federal dollars that will run out. Do you have a preferred way that you think the state should fund Health Source RI, since you think it's so important to keep it?
The Lieutenant Governor has been a great leader on this issue. We have one of the best healthcare exchanges in the country. And right now, I am very honored and proud that she has endorsed me to continue this achievement that we have in healthcare. I'm a small business person who provides healthcare to their employees. I know what the costs are. I know what the challenges are. There is $9 billion, it's approximately $9 billion that is in the whole healthcare system in Rhode Island. And we're talking about private money, Medicare, Medicaid, premiums that are being paid. There's enough money in the system. By following the course that we're on right now with healthcare, with the healthcare exchange that actually is working to help lower healthcare premiums, the money is in the system. We have to be more efficient. By continuing what we're doing, we'll lower costs. There'll be money there so we can.
But of course, I mean, you have to identify a way to get the money. Should it be a fee added to people's insurance premiums? Should it just be out of the general fund in the budget?
The money's in the system, and I believe that we don't have to spend more money to be able to continue this healthcare exchange.
You say you know what it's like for small business because you own a bowling alley in Johnston. What do you think the state can and should do to help small businesses?
Well, 90% of businesses in Rhode Island are small businesses, and most of those are micro businesses like my own, with 7 full-time employees, 5 or whatever. A lot of those businesses don't have time to come to the State House and tell us what their needs are. We have to be proactive. As Lieutenant Governor, I will definitely be out on the road. I'll be visiting showrooms, lunchrooms, break rooms, whatever, to make sure I'm talking to business owners, the thousands of business owners and workers in small businesses. Let them know that that they have an advocate in government that's going to work for them and help give them the resources so they can be successful.
With all respect, Elizabeth Roberts has gone out and talked to small businesses, and that hasn't stopped the state from suffering from one of the nation's highest unemployment rates. What would you do to make a tangible impact for small business?
Well, I differ on that with you because working with the Small Business Advocacy Council, you work with the SBA, you work with stakeholders around the state in business, and that has produced some good results. The Office of Regulation, if I say it correctly, but there's an Office of Regulation now that we have in the state. That came out of that. That came out of that council and the SBA summit. So there have been accomplishments.
All right, I'm afraid we have to take a break because we're out of time for this segment. Frank Ferri, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be watching September 9th, the Democratic primary, Republican primary that day as well. Stick with us, though, because up next we have Matt Fecteau. He's running against David Cicilline in that Democratic primary. Stick with us on Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Ted Nesi, filling in this week for Tim White. Joining me on the panel, Rhode Island Public Radio political reporter Ian Donis. And joining us now in the second half is Matt Fecteau. He is running in the Democratic primary against Congressman David Cicilline, who of course represents the 1st Congressional District and is now seeking a 3rd term. Matt, let's start with the easy question. Why are you running for U.S. House?
Well, when I was overseas in Iraq, all I could think about was coming home. And when I come home, at the unemployment rate, we have the highest unemployment rate in the country. Our roads, our bridges are dilapidated. And the man who perpetuated the financial crisis in Providence, well, we gave him a promotion. I want to change that. I think it's time for a clean slate. And the ties that this gentleman has to the political establishment, I think that it's questionable. I'm very concerned with regards to his ties to, for example, Gordon Fox. I think that Rhode Island would benefit from a new perspective, and that's why I decided to run.
On a couple episodes ago on Newsmakers, we had on 2 Republicans running against David Cicilline, Stan Tran, Cormac Lynch. And to be honest, it's no surprise a Republican would run against David Cicilline. He's a very loyal partisan Democrat. But it's somewhat more surprising to see a fellow Democrat saying that the party should oppose renomination for Cicilline. What's your pitch to your fellow Democrats who twice now have chosen him as their nominee in this House seat, that no, he's not doing the job, he's not right for the Democratic Party?
Well, unfortunately, with his history, how he got elected, the deception in 2010, the gerrymandering of districts in 2012, and also his Make It in America block grant package, which went nowhere. It's just continuous misleading us, deception. We need a break. We need someone who can take the office, have some integrity in the office, and will be a sincere, honest broker.
Sounds like, so it's largely about the personal qualities of David Cicilline. Are there any issues where you strongly disagree with him?
Absolutely.
What are some of those?
One issue is term limits. We need new perspectives in Congress. Unfortunately, Congressman Cicilline has come out in the past opposed to term limits. I also support regulation of marijuana at a federal level. That is something Congressman Cicilline has flip-flopped on continuously. And those are 2 key issues. Of course, I could name a couple votes, but I can get into that if you'd like.
And just on term limits, what term limit would you set for the House?
Oh, God, it depends. I would, but at the end of the day, I would like to incentivize new people to come in. I mean, I would like to set up maybe a select committee to investigate what type of term limits would be feasible. But it could vary, and I am open to different suggestions. But at the end of the day, so long as we can get new people into Congress, I'd pretty much support it.
Matt, we respect your choice to throw your hat in the ring, but we also know that congressional incumbents like Congressman Cicilline get reelected at a rate of about 96%. Meanwhile, about half the members of the General Assembly are going unopposed for reelection. Why does it make more sense for you to run an uphill battle for an office like Congress rather than an office where you might have a more realistic shot of winning, like the General Assembly?
Because I think we need revolutionary change. That's why I decided to run. I think we need revolutionary change at the federal level. However, I don't care. It's about democracy. Democracy is about choices. And I want them to make their choice on September 9th, 2014. I prefer they choose me. But I've been hearing a lot lately that it's an uphill battle. And I would disagree. I would very much disagree that it's an uphill battle. If people go out there and vote their discontent, Congressman Cicilline would be out of office in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. But voting in the primary especially rarely exceeds probably around 18%. But we have to go out, we have to vote. I would prefer 90% turnout in the primary and being stomped by Congressman Cicilline than 18% and him winning.
Jobs and the economy are certainly a top issue for most Rhode Islanders. How would you be different on those issues than from Congressman Cicilline?
Well, as far as jobs, I would like to focus in on infrastructure. Congressman Cicilline, he also has discussed infrastructure. In President Obama, he's also discussed a national infrastructure bank. As far as jobs, I would probably press for either a modified version of the Department of Transportation's program known as TIFIA, or I would support the National Infrastructure Bank. So long as it brings jobs back to the state of Rhode Island, I'd be pretty satisfied with it.
And to switch it up a little bit, we see President Obama supporting airstrikes in Iraq. You're an Iraq War veteran. Do you think this will be an effective strategy for containing the fundamentalist group or ISIS, or do you think it's going to come to a point where U.S. troops will have to be back on the ground in larger numbers?
Well, U.S. troops are technically on the ground. They're just advisors, not necessarily combat
I meant
troops.
Larger numbers.
Well, I mean, we have to contain it. We should not be intervening. We should not be re-engaging ourselves in a conflict that is a 1,000-year-old conflict that seems like it has no end. We have finite resources. There's other countries on the international stage that need our attention. And I would be very much opposed to more combat troops in Iraq.
You don't agree with Colin Powell's observation that if we break Iraq, meaning we, the United States, we are responsible for staying involved?
Well, there's a difference between staying involved and having combat troops on the ground. And we should support an inclusive Iraqi government. But I don't think that that includes combat troops on the ground. So we can still support an inclusive government with minimal soldiers on the ground.
Matt, particularly, as Ian says, with Iraq back in the news, I wanted to ask you more about your service in the country. Just to give people a sketch, what years were you there? What did you do and where were you stationed?
Well, I was a platoon leader in Iraq. I served from 2001 to 2009. I served roughly 2.5 years. There's about a month break in between my tours. I volunteered to go back because they needed a platoon leader. It was one of the most difficult decisions in my entire life, to be honest with you. But I led soldiers in combat. I oversaw operations that impacted roughly 31,000 soldiers and contractors in Iraq. I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets, and I received 2 master's degrees while I was overseas in Iraq. And
which regions of Iraq were you deployed to?
To be honest with you, it's all across Iraq. We would fly one base to another. It depends. I've been to JSS Sadr City, Baghdad, Balad, Camp Taji, a wide array of different posts across Iraq.
What are your most vivid memories of being, probably the vast majority of Newsmakers viewers did not serve in Iraq, even though we've been hearing so much about the country for so many years now. I mean, when you think of Iraq and your time there, what was it like as just an American being in that country, especially in it being in the war-torn years when you were there?
It was difficult. I mean, it was around the time Facebook and Twitter, they were developing. But I would see my friends and family going through just regular life experiences, going to the mall, and I would be in a desert. So it was very trying. Getting shot at is not the most comfortable thing in the world, just so you know. But unfortunately, it was a reality for us. And it's just a shame that I'm just so sad to see it turn out the way it is right now.
That it's still going this way. Do you think, looking back, do you think it was a mistake to invade Iraq, or do you think it was the right decision in 2003?
I think it was a big mistake to invade Iraq, especially with the ongoing war in Afghanistan. I did not support it at the time. However, the chaos, the turmoil in Iraq, something needed to be done. And as you know, I reluctantly deployed again to support the cause. Well, to support the soldiers.
And did you, when you talked with your fellow soldiers there, do you think, was that a widespread view? Would you feel like you were in the minority in at the time you were there in country? Do you think most of your fellow soldiers were having doubts about whether it was right to go in there, or do you think for the most part people were still on board with the mission?
I have no doubt in my mind that there were a number of doubts and a number of people questioning what our mission was there in Iraq. And every day you're bombarded with another death, either via paper, you actually witness it, or through a variety of different avenues. Of course, when you lose a fellow service member, you're going to question a cause or question why you are there. And unfortunately, it got to the point where a lot of us felt that our country forgot about us. Mm-hmm. Year after year, the Democrats, when they took the House and the Senate, they passed nominal resolutions to end the war in Iraq. And it was just nominal. It didn't go anywhere. And when you get back from Iraq, there's no jobs. The Department of Veterans Affairs, it's a mess. So as a military veteran, I feel that our country, I don't say our country forgot about us, but we have some serious issues we need to work on.
And with we see this scandal now in the Veterans Affairs Department. I don't know if you interact at all with the VA as a younger veteran, but I mean, What's your reaction, and do you think it's solved? Are you hearing talk about it among your fellow veterans?
Yeah, we're upset. We're very upset. We're disgusted. My mentor at Harvard, Professor Bilmer, she estimates the war in Iraq costs between $3 and $6 trillion. And we have a $150 billion budget for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And it sounds like a lot until you realize it's 100 billion to 150 billion. Until you realize that there's a lot of problems out there with veterans. PTSD is still being diagnosed. We're still trying to determine who has it, who doesn't. We're still trying to assess who is exposed to chemicals over there. I mean, I worked right across the street from a factory that actually burnt plastic and burnt other type of materials, and we've inhaled a number of fumes. So I'm very concerned about the funding for the VA, absolutely.
All right, that's actually all the time we have this week. Matt, thank you very much for joining us. Again, the primary is facing Congressman David Cicilline on September 9th. That's primary day for everyone in every race, and we'll have many more debates and polls coming up on Eyewitness News in the coming weeks, and we hope you'll tune into those. And of course, Tim White will be back here next week. If you missed any of this episode of Newsmakers or any other episode of Newsmakers, you can check those out on WPRI.com. That's also where you can get our voter guide and all the latest information on all the releases as we collect it. Again, primary day, September 9th. For Ian Donis, I'm Ted Nesi. We'll see you back here next week on Newsmakers.